Please, let's not cancel our wedding. I know I acted a bit immature, but when I saw his face, I felt bad. It seemed like my boyfriend's dad was judging me, and my boyfriend didn't stand up for me. I was really fed up with both of them, judging me just by what I wear or own. At our first meeting, they made me feel unwelcome, and at the second, they looked down on me for not being rich. But when they saw the brand of my coat, suddenly they treated me differently. My name's Jessica Smith, and I'm 28 years old. I work at an airport, and my folks have a fashion business back in Italy. Despite that, I live solo in New York City. That's where I met Jacob Turner, my current boyfriend, at my favorite cafe. He's a couple of years older than me and a regular at the same spot. As we started seeing more of each other, he treated me well, and I quickly fell for him. After 2 years together, he proposed we visit his folks for a marriage meeting. I was overjoyed. It felt like he was on the same page about marriage. His dad, like mine, runs a big fashion brand, and I admired how globally active he was. Jacob, just like his dad, dressed in branded clothes. When he mentioned his dad wasn't keen on folks who seemed poor, I reassured him with a smile, saying I was okay with it. I'm not saying you're lacking in money or anything, but it's more about how you present yourself, he said. I don't think he meant any harm, but his words felt like he was talking down to me. Are you implying there's something wrong with how I dress? I asked. No, I think your individual style is great, he replied. How dare you? I make sure to dress nicely to be worthy of being with Jacob. Ever since I started dating Jacob, I've been paying more attention to my fashion, even on my days off. I always wear makeup now, and I've started to take a keen interest in my outfits, from affordable brands to luxury labels. Jacob's presence always shines brightly, and I feel like I pale in comparison next to him. His best feature is undoubtedly his looks, with his model-like physique and face, and the confident aura he exudes. He could easily be in a fashion magazine. As for work, I earn a higher income and speak multiple languages. In terms of skills and abilities, I might have the upper hand. However, his facial features are so striking that I couldn't help but be drawn to him effortlessly. But his occasional condescending comments bothered me, I admitted. Well, Jessica, you're beautiful, so I think you'll be okay. But just know, my dad is strict, Jacob warned. Strict in what way? I inquired. In determining whether you fit the brand image of my dad's company and if you're suitable for the Turner family, he explained. So basically, my dad is extremely proud of his brand, and he won't forgive anyone who tarnishes it. I might not be able to support you on the day, he added with a smile, which only increased my pressure. What do you mean you won't help me? I felt like he was ready to abandon me without a second thought. As the day of the marriage meeting approached, I couldn't shake off my growing unease. Their future in-laws' house turned out to be a luxurious high-rise apartment. Which floor do they live on? I asked. The top floor, he replied casually. But to me, it was shocking enough to make me lose my balance. It wasn't surprising, though. Later, I found out it was a super luxury apartment with a monthly rent of $7,000. The apartment boasted 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and a well-equipped kitchen. It was conveniently located just a 2-minute walk from the station, although the rent was steep. Feeling uneasy, I couldn't help but wonder aloud, I hope everything will be all right. To my surprise, he responded with a somewhat tense expression, I'm not sure. It seemed like his father's approval mattered more to him than his own girlfriend's feelings. Clinging to a sense of unease, I stepped into the elevator with him. Upon arriving at his place, we were greeted by his mother. From her demeanor and the luxurious attire she wore, it was evident that the Turners were a well-to-do family. My parents also run a business, so I recognized right away that everything she was wearing was high-end. I thought to myself, despite her welcome, her tone was chilly, as if she had little interest in me. I was ushered into the living room, where his father awaited us. Jacob, is this the woman you wish to marry? He asked. Yes, this is Jessica. She's 2 years younger than me and works as ground crew at the airport, Jacob replied. As he finished the introduction, I nodded politely. Just as I was about to introduce myself, his father posed a question that left me puzzled. Jessica, how much did your entire outfit cost? I hesitated before answering. The coat is from the Gap, and the skirt is from Zara, so altogether, it's probably around $300. Upon hearing my response, his father let out a heavy sigh and proceeded to scold Jacob. Jacob, you've brought this poorly dressed woman here. Are you trying to bring shame to our family name? I was taken aback. Not only had his father insulted me by calling me poorly dressed, but Jacob, instead of defending me, was apologizing profusely. That's when I knew I couldn't go through with marrying him. That's enough. We're done here, declared his father, dismissing me completely. I'm the CEO of a luxury brand. I can't tolerate a woman with such cheap taste. Jacob stood there, stunned into silence. Our engagement was off, and we made our way home, walking silently side by side. Jacob began to complain. Didn't I tell you not to dress how you like? Because of you, I was humiliated in front of my parents. What? Why can't I choose my own clothes? Are you going to force me to wear only your dad's brand after we're married? I snapped back, angered by his lack of support and his father's attitude. Jacob's emotions started to bubble up too. Yes, exactly. If you wear his clothes, you'll impress everyone. Please, just listen to me for once. Your behavior is putting our marriage at risk, he pleaded. Then let's call off the wedding, I retorted sharply. Jacob stopped in his tracks, shocked by my firmness. With a tense expression, he stuttered, You're kidding, right? I responded firmly, I'm serious. Suddenly, all of his confidence vanished, and he began apologizing repeatedly, begging, please, anything but calling off the wedding. Seeing him plead like that made me wonder if I had been too harsh. So, for now, I decided to wait and watch. We agreed to revisit the marriage meeting in a week, but his father threatened to call off the engagement if things didn't go well. I found myself thinking along the same lines as Jacob. Hey, what about wearing this outfit for the meeting with my parents? I suggested, noticing how affected Jacob was after the first meeting. His biggest worry seemed to be not upsetting his father. It was clear that his father's approval meant more to him than our upcoming marriage. That's why he confidently proposed wearing the same brand of clothing as his father. I'll decide what to wear. If you're going to interfere, let's end things right here, I told him firmly, feeling my desire to marry him slowly fading. As a last resort, I decided to reach out to my dad. I spilled everything that had happened to him. Fast forward to the day of the second meeting. Jacob seemed anxious from the morning, while I remained calm. However, there was one noticeable difference. My outfit. All the clothes I wore were from Italy, something I had requested from my dad. He oversees a brand overseas, which is also sold in the U.S. Sensing the tension, my dad arranged for clothes to be delivered from his American branch. Since Jacob was at work when they arrived, he was unaware of the switch. When he noticed my new coat, he looked puzzled but didn't comment due to our tight schedule before the meeting. On the way to his parents' house, he pleaded with me, Let's just make this meeting a success, okay? You do want to marry me, right? His expression suggested that I should feel privileged to marry him, but deep down, I wasn't as excited about getting married anymore. The growing distrust between us weighed heavily on my mind as we arrived at his parents' house. Despite my inner turmoil, I plastered on a fake smile and assured him I'll do my best. This time, it was his father who greeted us, with my mother-in-law nowhere in sight. Without wasting any time, my father-in-law launched into criticism. Jacob, what's the meaning of this? Didn't you promise to dress her in our brand? His pride in the family brand surpassed my expectations. He once mentioned that even a pair of socks from their brand cost over $200. I'm sorry, Dad. Jessica insisted on choosing her own outfit. Jacob apologized. My father-in-law let out a sigh and turned his attention to me. Jessica, could you please refrain from tarnishing our family's brand image? That coat looks rather cheap, he remarked, scrutinizing my new coat closely. It seems like a knockoff, doesn't it? It resembles Louis Vuitton at first glance, but it's not genuine. He took out his phone and began searching for something, likely checking the price. Here it is. There's a knockoff that looks identical to your coat. and it's inexpensive. Even if you choose not to wear our brand, surely there are better options than that. My father-in-law proceeded to ruthlessly critique my appearance. His behavior was utterly unacceptable, signaling that this meeting was no longer just a formality for our impending marriage. Despite the tension, Jacob remained silent in front of his father, failing to defend me. "Well, take a seat and remove that $60 coat. You look destitute," he sneered. Unbeknownst to him, there was a coat similar to mine priced at $60, albeit missing a few zeros. At this point, I had reached my limit. "Excuse me, may I borrow a hanger?" I reached out for one nearby, but my father-in-law scoffed. "For a cheap coat like that, a hanger is too generous. There's a basket over there, use that. Jacob, fetch it for her." He commanded Jacob to hand me a laundry basket, reducing him to nothing more than a puppet under his father's control. Despite our exchanged glances, Jacob remained silent. However, his demeanor shifted when he glimpsed the label on my coat, which I reluctantly placed in the basket. "Dad, this coat is Prada," he exclaimed in disbelief. Both of them were stunned. My future father-in-law, who had previously dismissed my coat as cheap, suddenly changed his tune upon seeing the tag. "Oh, Jessica, why didn't you mention it earlier? You're wearing something truly remarkable," he remarked, attempting to force a smile. I returned his gaze with a cold stare and then addressed the matter of our marriage. "Let's call it off, please." They were taken aback. "What do you mean, Jessica? It's only fair. Even if he's your own father, if you can't defend your future wife when she's being belittled, I can't accept you as my husband." When I turned to Jacob for a response, he looked down, unable to utter a word. "Furthermore, father-in-law, this coat is from a brand owned by my father. And when I mentioned Prada, it's a collaborative piece with Prada, overseen by my father. There are only 5 of these in the world, valued at $60,000. $60,000. Father-in-law reacted as if struck by lightning. Later, I learned that the most expensive coat from his brand cost around $12,000. Although $12,000 might seem high-end to most people, it pales in comparison to mine. So it appears big brand CEOs judge people solely based on their appearance, huh? My father-in-law was speechless. Turning to both of them, I continued, "And Jacob, did you really think being the son of a CEO made you invincible? Sure, you dress well and look good, but your character doesn't measure up." "What? What are you saying?" Jacob attempted to retort, but to me, his defensiveness seemed absurd. "Can you even understand where I'm coming from? You left me to endure all the criticism alone and even pressured me to succeed the second time around. How would you feel if our positions were reversed?" "Well, I don't want to endure any more pain just to save face," I rebuked him sternly. His demeanor softened, and he simply said, "I'm sorry." Then, addressing my father-in-law, Jacob added, "Of course, I approve of the marriage. I was wrong. Please, let's calm down." Despite his attempt to regain control, I was thoroughly repulsed by his behavior, still under the mistaken belief that he held the upper hand. Letting out a deep sigh, I startled my father-in-law, who looked at me anxiously. "Are you familiar with the ultra-luxury Italian brand Ruby?" "Ah, yes, they're a renowned global brand." "I know the CEO," my father-in-law responded. "Well, my coat is from Ruby. It's a collaboration with Prada." "I see. But the issue isn't. Actually, I'm the CEO's daughter," I interrupted. "What? You're kidding." Both of them stared at me in disbelief, their mouths opening and closing without uttering a word. It was clear they were struggling to process the revelation. I intended to formally disclose this when we announced our engagement, but given the circumstances, it didn't seem appropriate. So, it appears I've been disrespecting the daughter of a more prestigious brand all this time. So, Dad, Jacob, enough with the charade. How did you not know this sooner? Because of you, we've made fools of ourselves. My father-in-law began to blame his son, feeling cornered. While it may have appeared as though he was merely deflecting blame, it evidently struck a nerve for both of them. "I had no idea, all right?" All I knew was that she worked as ground staff, my boyfriend admitted, his voice trembling with fear of his father. He seemed genuinely terrified. Suddenly, my father-in-law's demeanor towards me shifted. "Ah, I apologize for my son's behavior. Let me prepare some tea for you," he said, forcing a smile that I found insincere. "Do you always judge people based on superficial factors and change your attitude once you learn about their status? Can't you evaluate people beyond their appearances?" I confronted him, my tone firm as I had resigned myself to the fact that our marriage was no longer an option. When I informed my father about the situation, he mentioned that he's contemplating acquiring your company. What? He's planning to buy my company? Yes, he believes that someone who judges others solely by their fashion brand isn't fit to lead a major company. Fashion brands shouldn't be used to flaunt status. Therefore, the wearer, my father-in-law, began to sweat visibly, starting to grasp the seriousness of the situation. While he may flaunt his status as the president of a major brand now, being acquired would be a different story. Dad, if we're acquired now, we're in trouble, right? We don't have the resources to resist, do we? Jacob asked his father, his disappointment evident in his voice. It seemed he had some understanding of the company's financial situation. I later discovered that my father-in-law's company was barely scraping by, always teetering on the brink of financial ruin. Any significant setback could easily push them into the red, and it seemed that setback had arrived in the form of a potential acquisition. My father always follows through on his promises, and he raised me to do the same. So, as I mentioned before, there will be no wedding. "Jessica, I'm so sorry," Jacob said, tears welling up in his eyes. I barely spared him a glance. It was hard to reconcile the once cool image of him with the pathetic sight before me. And then there was my father-in-law. "Jessica, I beg you, please reconsider the acquisition," he pleaded. While I didn't hold the final decision, it was surreal to see my father-in-law groveling to me, the same person he had looked down on just moments earlier. His misplaced pride disgusted me, and I simply replied, "That's for my father to decide." With all hope seemingly lost, my father-in-law paled and sank to his knees. Ignoring the two despairing men, I left my father-in-law's house. Following that day, I lost touch with Jacob. When I briefed my father, he disclosed that the acquisition process was already in motion. My father, typically gentle and fair-minded, underwent a transformation upon learning of my distress. He had long eyed the opportunity to acquire my ex-father-in-law's company, buying his time for the right moment. However, upon discovering that the same man who had belittled me for my background was the CEO of the target company, my father's resolve solidified. All uncertainty evaporated. He remarked, "In this acquisition, my priority is to safeguard the well-being of all employees except the CEO." This meant that my ex-father-in-law's fate rested entirely in my father's hands. As for the subsequent fates of those two individuals, I remained uninformed. However, a sense of relief washed over me when I stumbled upon breaking news on TV. The report announced the acquisition of a prominent fashion brand by Ruby Corp, a major American entity. The footage featured my ex-father-in-law during the acquisition, looking utterly defeated, the fire extinguished from his eyes. My ex-father-in-law and ex-boyfriend, who both prioritized social status in marriage, appeared incapable of recognizing the intrinsic worth of individuals. I firmly believe that CEOs should emulate my father, who assesses individuals based on their character rather than superficial traits. This experience imparted a profound lesson, applicable not only to branded items but to all facets of life.